much. Okay, we'll go on to question number 2, and that we'll start with Mr. Mata. Property taxes have seen a steady rise in past years. Particularly commercial property taxes have seen a steep climb. A small commercial property valued at $300,000 in 2005 would have had property taxes slightly below $8,000. While property taxes have typically increased by or property values, have typically increased about 17% in that time to where that property is valued at $350,000, the taxes have increased over $12,000 in that 5-year span, and over 50% increase. This compares to a residential property tax of about $4,000 on a similarly valued residential property. How much burden do you feel commercial property owners should bear, and do you feel we are nearing a tipping point where particularly small businesses will be unable to bear this burden?
Yes, I think we are reaching a tipping point, and I think it's not only with the commercial property, but I think on the residential as well. We've had in the past few years a 22% increase in property tax. That's about a percentage point a month that property taxes have gone up. When we look at the projections going forward, in fact, there was a work session last week, and I talked to Bernie Hand afterwards and got some more information on the projections. If you look at the general obligation requirements for the debt, which is what ends up coming to us in property taxes, forget the STAR bonds, forget the TIF, forget all of that. 2013, that requirement for the debt will go up by 149%. Now, if you take that 149% and then apply it to the total property taxes for 2011, that's going to necessitate a 20% increase in that number. Okay, and that's just for the debt. That's before you talk about, staffing the fire stations, or talking about even any additional debt for K-18, whatever our responsibilities are there. We also know that FEMA's come in and changed some rules that could cost up to $5 million to adjust the levies. There's, when the north and south end do get, completed, there'll be extra maintenance cost involved. So we have a lot of expenses that will also add into that number. So that's where I think the budget is going to come in and be critical to what things we can make more efficient, how we can save money in the process. The other thing is we're going to have to look as we budget for more capital projects, what is truly important and what isn't. I think as we go through the budget, we have to operate from a full list standpoint. If we say something's really important we need to spend money on, we're going to have to take something else off the list, because we do have a lot of expenses and a lot of bills that are coming due in the next couple of years.
Well, in my mind, it is all about priorities. The key problem here with the tax thing, are we at a tipping point? We're probably already there. If you're looking at the paper, a couple of businesses have already closed their doors in town. And I'm sure that the tax burden has had a big impact on that. So what I believe has to happen is we set some priorities and determine, what is it the city needs? And there are specific needs, fire, police, public safety. Those have to be funded. And then there is a long list of wants, and that want list is endless for any of us when we're managing household budgets or city budget. And we've got to decide where the dollars are going to go. And that means that if you add something to the city budget, something's got to come off. I'm convinced that we shouldn't add any new obligation bonds or additional debt until we retire some. And if we can get the Discovery Center and all of the new businesses, if everything moves in the direction which was the original vision of the city, then if taxes receipts keep going up like they did in February of this year, then there will be monies to fund all of the wants. But right now, it is important to take care of the needs and get a handle on the debt and stick to a set of priorities which gives value back to the taxpayer. And that's one of the things I perceive in talking to folks around town is you have to feel like you're getting a value for your dollar. And when voters go out and vote because they want to improve the city pool system and they vote for a bond, you can say, okay, we want to spend our money on that. The question is, a lot of the funds that are brought in when you pay your taxes every year, are you getting the value for that? And we need to have a set of priorities where the citizens feel like, yes, I'm getting the value for my dollar.
think everybody is pretty much in agreement of all of us that the tax levels in Manhattan have continued to rise, and that we continue to see stress on households and on businesses for those taxes. The funding mechanisms for some of the taxes are in place. That doesn't mean that we can't ignore, or that we can ignore how the STAR and the TIFs, some of the other bond issues are funded. Because if something were not to work the way we perceive, that would fall back on the moral obligation of the city, which would have a direct impact to property owners and in other forms and sources, much the same way that we've seen in Junction City. But the critical thing is managing our overall budget to a level that allows us to continue to enhance the quality of life in our community without overburdening or adding to what we have there today. The small businesses are what they are, small businesses. And we've seen some struggle. And from my perspective, some of those are related to things not tied to taxes. And I deal with that on a daily basis. And I don't like the fact that small businesses close. And it's inherent on us to support those businesses. And part of the reason they do close is they either have not brought in the products and services that we want, or we have just ignored them and not utilized their service. So I think we need to make sure that we do that and promote them. But from the standpoint of taxes on business, if my understanding is correct, the taxation on that is established by statute at the state level. And it was, I think it started in Indiana because of huge disparity in property taxes on commercial properties. And it has bled through the entire nation to be as fair as possible. So the burden is relatively at the state level, but we need to be cautious not to overburden any taxpayer in our community.
Rich is right. It is the county assessor that sets the tax rate. The county assessor is required by the legislature to establish that commercial tax rate at 90%. Currently it's about 88%. And so probably commercial property taxes are going to rise up to that 90% level. And the city commission doesn't have any control over that. So there's not a whole lot that we can do. Keep in mind in taxes that the biggest impetus for the taxes going up in the last year or two is a result of voter initiatives on schools. The school bond initiative, you can see what's happening to the high school over there. It's an enormous rebuilding which was needed, and the citizens of Manhattan decided it was needed, as well as the enhancement of the recreation swimming pools in City Park and in Cedar Park. So those are voter initiatives. Now, how are we going to handle that over a period of time? I think what's going to happen, and we're going to get to that probably on the next question, is with the downtown redevelopment, especially the north end is already well underway. With the downtown redevelopment being as successful so far in the north end as it is, I think we'll be in a position where we'll pay off some of that indebtedness sooner rather than later. And as that occurs, then I think we're going to see the property tax levels, property taxes to level off, to stabilize, and perhaps decline. That's the idea.
Manhattan has a higher cost of living than Lawrence, Hutchinson, Topeka, Wichita, Garden City, Hayes, Dodge City, Salina. It has a higher cost of living than Norman, Oklahoma, Lincoln, Nebraska, Columbia, Missouri, Stillwater, Oklahoma, Lubbock, Texas, Waco. Manhattan has a higher cost of living than Lawton, Oklahoma, Colorado Springs, and El Paso, Texas, Killeen, Texas. According to John Brake, the city indebtedness is $225 million. Since we started this campaign, it seems like the city indebtedness goes up $1 million a week since we started just 4 weeks ago. So it's going to be real, it's going to be there. I haven't seen a big increase in the purchase of tar and feathers, but when that point comes, we better be concerned. Anyhow, the Marines like to think outside the box, so what can we do about this? I've talked to several commissioners or former commissioners, and they tell me about the city-owned property. There's 2 houses west of the airport there that the city owns. I know Ken Black and Susan lived in one of them when he was the airport manager. But probably they're worth $100,000, $150,000 a piece plus the land around it. We could raise $300,000 just selling the land out there. And during the urban renewal in the south end of Manhattan, there's dozens of properties the city owns on the south side of Manhattan that the city could sell. If it's empty land there, nobody's paying taxes on it, the city owns the property. And so if you even give it to Habitat for Humanity for them to build new ones, right now Habitat for Humanity is building new houses in Ogden, so they're getting the benefit of their building houses in Ogden and not in Manhattan.